What's up, YouTube? This is your boy John from the Jersey Shore, and I am back with you today to give you my review of the 2012 film, Maniac. That was a lot. Maniac was written by Alexandre and Gregory Levasseur. Was directed by Franck Khalfoun, starring Nora Arnezeder, I think that's how you say it, and Elijah Wood. So our main character in this story is a guy named Frank. Frank is portrayed by Elijah Wood. Frank owns a mannequin shop that he inherited from his mother when she passed away. When we first meet Frank, he is setting up an online date to go out with a girl named Lucy, and Lucy is portrayed by Megan Duffy. During this date, we learn that Frank, there's something that ain't quite right with this guy. You learn that pretty quickly. In the middle of the date, he gets up, he's kind of freaking out a little bit, and he says he's got to go take his medication. So he goes into the bathroom, he takes his medicine, and you see his reflection in the mirror, and you can tell that something's just not right with Frank. He goes back to the table. When they leave the restaurant, Lucy invites him up to her place for another drink and a little something else. So he goes up to the room with Lucy, and they start to fool around. Once they start to fool around, you get an overhead shot of Frank. It's his reflection in a mirror that's above a bed. You see in his face that he's not all there, or maybe he's there too much. I don't know, you decide. And suddenly Lucy starts to get quiet. The camera pans back and you see that Frank is strangling Lucy. So he jumps up on top of Lucy and he strangles her to death. What do you do after you strangle somebody? Well, naturally you scalp them, right? So Frank scalps Lucy, and then you cut scene back to Frank's place. So after Frank scalps his date, he takes the scalp back to his place. He goes into his apartment and he immediately starts to talk to all the mannequins in the room. He goes into the bedroom, he takes out the scalp, puts it on top of one of the mannequins' head, and says this might hurt a little bit, and staples the scalp to her head. So Frank is a deeply disturbed psychopath with mommy issues and a serious scalp fetish. That's just some weird shit. There's a couple occasions in this movie where you get flashbacks of Frank from when he was a child. Mommy owned a mannequin shop where she bought, sold, and restored classic mannequins or old mannequins or whatever mannequin. I don't know what the mannequin rating system is, whatever. She bought, sold, and restored mannequins. But not only did she buy, sell, and restore mannequins, Mommy had a little bit of a side hustle too. She was a hooker. And on more than one occasion, Frank caught her in the act of hooking. And this obviously had a pretty bad effect on this little boy's mind. And very obviously had a lot to do with molding him into the psychopath that he is today. So the next morning, he's in his mannequin shop doing whatever it is that you do in a mannequin shop. And he sees a girl kneeling down out front of his store taking pictures. He goes up to the window. He raises the shutters up so that she can see better inside and he can see better outside, I'm sure. And this is where we meet Anna. And Anna is portrayed by Nora Arnezeder. I really hope that that's how you say that girl's name. So these two get into a little bit of we just met conversation. He asks what she does, she asks what he does. She says, I do photography. He says, I play around with these mannequins. And then she starts to look at the mannequins and she says, you know what, I could use a few of these things. I have a photography show coming up, and if I could rent a couple of these or borrow a couple of these off of you, that would be great. I know exactly what I would do with them. I guarantee Anna would do something different with these mannequins than Frank would. Nasty. So Frank does let her borrow these mannequins, and then he pretty quickly becomes completely infatuated with Anna.
Stop staring. You're missing a movie.
That's not good. So that's it. I'm not going to give you any more details about this movie. That's the basic layout of the movie, and I'm pretty sure you can figure out where it goes from there. So I guess the first thing I'll talk about is the one thing that I just absolutely hated about this movie. The entire movie is shot from the point of view of Frank, from Elijah Wood's character. So you don't see I guess there's a couple of scenes in the movie where you see his face, where you actually, or the camera is on Frank. If you watch the movie, you'll understand what I mean by this. The entire movie, you see Elijah Wood several times throughout the movie, but there's not very many times that you actually see Elijah Wood on camera. You see him in reflections in mirrors and reflections in windows and different little strategic placements of reflective devices where you see Frank's face. You never see the camera on Frank. And the reason for that is because the movie is shot from the point of view of Frank. So you only see your own reflection throughout this movie, and that just felt really weird to me. It made the audio very strange. Every time Frank spoke, it almost sounded like it was coming out of a coffee can or something. I wasn't crazy at all about the way that this movie was shot. Another thing that I absolutely hated about this was, if you've seen enough of my videos and you're familiar with my content and all, you know that I really enjoy good effects in horror movies. There are two particular scenes in this movie that it's CGI and it looks absolutely dreadful. The first one is the first kill in the movie. You see him, he stabs a girl up through the bottom of her jaw, through her mouth, and then he grabs a hold of the top of her head and takes a knife and slits right along her hairline and pulls her entire scalp off. A, it's impossible, and B, it looks absolutely terrible. And the second special effect that I hated in this movie was basically the same exact thing. Later in the movie, he has somebody on a bed. He grabs them by the scalp, cuts a little slit along their hairline, and pulls their entire scalp off and splatters blood all over the wall. It is, I mean, obviously, they're not going to be able to do this, like really do this, but if they had practical effects and they did this with practical effects, it would look a lot more realistic. This is just, they should not have, I think that this is an example of, they should just have not done this at all. If they were going to use CGI and the CGI looked that bad, I can't imagine that when this was done and they looked at the final product, they said, my God, that looks great. I'm just a guy who lives in New Jersey that watches horror movies, and I can tell you that that looks awful. That should have never been put on film. What I did like about this movie was I thought that Elijah Wood and Nora Arnezeder, God, I hope that that's the way you say that girl's name. I thought that Elijah and Nora, I thought that they played their roles very, very well. They were very convincing. Elijah Wood, everybody knows Elijah Wood. That guy's been around forever. And if you're a Lord of the Rings fan, of course you know who Elijah Wood is. They both did an incredibly good job in this movie. He was genuinely creepy in this movie. And you see the whole range of emotions coming out of him in this movie. You see him from timid to scared to psychopath to just crazed murderous killer in his eyes. He was fantastic in this movie. I know that this was like a little bit of a dip for him. He normally doesn't do things like this, but he did a really good job in this movie. And Nora, I don't know her. I don't think I've ever seen her anywhere else, and if I have, it must have been in a much smaller role. So I could dig into her a little bit on IMDb to see where else I may or may not know her from. But she was fantastic as well. I thought that her innocence on camera was very good, and her curiosity. You see her in like a professional photography setting, and she pulls all of that off very well. Later in the movie, as I'm sure you could assume, she has to put fear on camera, and she does that very well also. So for me, that was the best thing about this movie, was the performance of our two main characters. Another thing that I really liked about this movie, the only other thing that I really liked about this movie, was the ending. The ending in this movie is the exact opposite of one of the things that I absolutely hated about this movie, the effects. The ending of this movie is extremely bloody, it's extremely graphic, and it is practical effects. And like I said, practical effects always look better because they are real, they're there. Granted, it's a man-made creation, the situation is not real, but what you are seeing on film is actually there. It's made with human hands, it's not clicks on a computer. So it looks real, flesh tearing, blood squirting. If you really have something tearing and something squirting, it's going to look better than clicks by a mouse on a keyboard that is not made or man-made or real in any way. The effects at the very end of this movie are awesome. I thought that the final couple minutes of this movie was the best part of this movie. As a gore hound, of course I did. And if you've seen this, you know what I'm talking about. If you've seen the original Maniac, you know what I'm talking about. But yes, The performances from the two main characters and the effects in the last 5 minutes are the best part of this thing for me. I really don't have a lot to say about this movie. I mean, it was all right. I wasn't compelled to jump up and turn it off, but I don't know that I'm going to be compelled to rush to watch it again either. This movie had its ups and it had its downs, and it has, obviously its pros and cons. But did this movie really need to be made? I don't know. I thought that the original 1980 movie, for me, was more compelling. I don't think that this was better than that movie was. But I don't know that it was worse than that movie was either. It's very difficult for me to say either way. I think, in my opinion, I'll put it this way. I think that old school horror nuts will like the 1980 movie more, and I think the new school, the new generation of horror that's into CGI and so forth, will like this movie. This movie's prettier. This movie has CGI in it. This movie has Elijah Wood in it. This movie has a beautiful girl in it. The old movie had Joe Spinell in it. Joe Spinell, A, not a lot of people know who he is, and B, he's not the best looking guy in the world. The movie's grainy, the movie's gritty, and there's no CGI in it. So you have two movies from two very different movie making eras in the horror genre. And like I said, I don't know that this movie needed to be made at all, to be totally honest with you. I was entertained by it, but I don't think that I'm going to be compelled to watch it again. So the 2012 remake of Maniac, was it good? I don't know. I guess it was okay. Did it need to be made? Probably not. I think the story was told in 1980 perfectly fine. I don't think it needed to be revisited. But I just think that this is another example of Hollywood grasping to put a new shine on old stories that were great. So as far as I'm concerned, I'm probably not going to watch this movie again. And if I do, Lord only knows when that will be. But you decide for yourself. Maniac 2012, I think it was all right. All right, folks, that's going to do it for my review of the 2012 remake of Maniac. Have you seen this movie? Have you seen the old movie? Have you seen both movies? Let me know in the comments section what you think of each movie and how you would compare the two. If you like this video, please give me a thumbs up. If you really like this video and you have been enjoying my content, please do me a huge personal favor. Go ahead and click that subscribe button and ring that notification bell. Take care of yourself, take care of each other, have a kick-ass day, and thank you for watching.